The New Orleans Saints' new offense looks tailor-made for star running back Alvin Kamara, and we get our first look today at minicamp. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I'm your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, there are two big returns expected at New Orleans Saints mandatory minicamp that actually aren't named Alvin Kamara and Marshon Lattimore. We'll take a look at a couple of returns that aren't getting the shine that they deserve. We're also going to take a look at what's more important for Marshon Lattimore than simply his presence at mandatory minicamp. And to kick us off, Alvin Kamara's debut in the New Orleans Saints' new offense begins today, and I cannot wait. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers will get $200 in bonus bets by winning any $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets by simply winning any $5 bet. Just head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, when it comes down to all the things that we're excited to see in the New Orleans Saints' new offense, the list is getting longer. Taysom Hill, the offensive line, rookie Taliesin Fuanga in particular, the zone run scheme, attacking the middle of the field, motion, play action. But I don't think that any of it excites me more than the idea of Alvin Kamara in this new New Orleans Saints offense, in an offense that looks like it's going to be simply built for him. I cannot wait to see what Alvin Kamara looks like in this new offense. And we get our first glimpse of it today at mandatory minicamp. So what I wanted to take a look at here was just kind of comparing other teams, other offensive systems, and their running backs and what their production has looked like, or not really production, what their opportunity has looked like over the course of the most recent years. So I found four teams that are in similar situations for the New Orleans Saints, and I wanted to take a look at them. So what I did was that I went back to 2021 with the Minnesota Vikings. Why the 2021 Vikings? Well, Klint Kubiak was their play caller at that point. So we'll take a look at that. We'll look at the 2023 San Francisco 49ers. There's more Kyle Shanahan, but hey, that's where Klint Kubiak most recently was before he became the New Orleans Saints' new offensive coordinator this offseason. We'll look at the 2022 Dolphins. Mike McDaniel formerly held a similar position to what Klint Kubiak held over in San Francisco. Went over to Miami. That was his first year in Miami. We'll look at that. And then just last year, looking at Bobby Slowick, who again held the same position that Klint Kubiak held the year before, moved over to Houston as the offensive coordinator, revamped their offense in 2023. So we'll look at the 2023 Texans as well to kind of get an idea of what maybe we might be able to expect from Alvin Kamara. Now, Alvin Kamara has not been short of opportunities in the passing game in New Orleans. He's received at least 65 targets every single season that he has played. Had a season a couple years ago where he only caught 57% of those passes, 57 of those passes, but then rebounded last year where he caught nearly 90% of the passes that went his way with over 80 targets in that season. The difference, though, on a 6.3-ish, rounding up, 6.3 yard per catch average for Alvin Kamara, not entirely different than some of these running backs that we're going to look at here in just a second. It just wasn't really the yardage production and, of course, the end zone production that you're accustomed to seeing from Alvin Kamara in the passing game. Why? Well, a lot of the throws that went his way were these little dump offs right over the line of scrimmage, right in the middle of the field, or tosses, throws to him behind the line of scrimmage. Never really anything that was fully on the outside that got him in space. None of those patented wheel routes that we've seen him run. Not really a lot of routes run from places that aren't out of the backfield. Remember, Alvin Kamara early on in his career, 2017, 2018, he was running routes out of the slot, out wide. He was running routes from all over the place. Hopefully we see more of that with the New Orleans Saints offense in 2024. We'll get a better idea of that starting this week. So let's look back at just the targets, right? We're just looking at the opportunities that were allotted to running backs in these four systems that have some similarity, right? Not carbon copy one-to-one, but some similarities in terms of what we're accustomed to seeing. The 2021 Minnesota Vikings used the combination of both Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison, their two top running backs in the passing game. Dalvin Cook with 49 targets, Alexander Mattison with 39 targets. Just as a little bonus here, CJ Ham, the team's fullback, 18 targets during that season, but played a lot of snaps, right? So a lot of opportunities to be out there lead blocking for these for these running backs when they're being utilized in the passing game and, of course, in the run game most immediately. The 2023 San Francisco 49ers last year, which is where Klint Kubiak was, he watched Kyle Shanahan scheme up Christian McCaffrey to the tune of 83 targets, all on his own. Sounds pretty similar to what Alvin Kamara has seen in the past. Kyle Juszczyk, by the way, only 17 targets in the passing game. You'd swear by the way that people talk about Kyle Juszczyk that he got way more pass game opportunities than that. 2022 Miami Dolphins, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson. Those were the top two targeted running backs out of the backfield, 42 and 24 targets respectively. And in last year's Texans team, Devin Singletary, Damian Pierce, 38-17 respectively. So here's what you need to know. Between 55 and 100 targets are going to running backs or fullbacks in the case of Christian McCaffrey and Kyle Juszczyk. Okay, that's where I got the 100 target top number from there. So between 55 to 100-ish targets are going to running backs. This system is going to follow suit for what we're seeing these other teams set as an example when instituting this scheme. And we already see here a concerted effort from 2021, a total of 88 targets going to players that are playing running back. Then you add an additional 18 targets. On top of that, you get over 100 targets coming out of the backfield. That was from the 2021 Vikings. So you're seeing a concerted effort by Klint Kubiak, and between the 49ers, Dolphins, and Texans, you're seeing similar systems maximize their running backs. Now, what's going to be interesting is what's going to be the split between Alvin Kamara and young running back Kendre Miller, who will barely be 22 when the season begins. We're going to have to see exactly how that all works out. But nonetheless, I am ridiculously excited, ridiculously excited to see Alvin Kamara back in his element for a change. Okay. A lot of running in between the tackles the last couple of years. A lot of those little dump offs just past the line of scrimmage or well behind the line of scrimmage these past couple of years. Now it's getting back to the bread and butter of who Alvin Kamara is. What's in his DNA as a player will be in the DNA of this new offensive system. And we start to get our first glimpse at all of that coming together today, and I cannot wait. We'll be giving you updates on that all throughout the week. How was Alvin Kamara used? Where did he line up? How was he utilized? Where were they throwing to him? Where was he running? What was he running behind? All these other things. We're going to dig into all that here over the course of the week, but I wanted to just give a little bit of a primer here in terms of how excited we are about what the expectations can be for Alvin Kamara in 2024, which all begin today in minicamp, or at least we assume. Let's go out there and see if he's out there, but I do believe he will be out there. Coming up next, Alvin Kamara is not the only big return. Of course, Marshon Lattimore is returning as well, but it's going to be more than just his presence at training camp that's going to give us an idea of where things are headed. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where you get to make every moment more. Summertime is here. That means baseball, NBA finals, and more, and you can bet on it all over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers will get $200 in bonus bets. You heard that right, $200 in bonus bets by winning any $5 bet. That's all it takes. Boston Celtics right now up on the Dallas Mavericks convincingly 2-0. Right now, the spread for their game as they travel back to Dallas, Dallas Mavericks favored 1.5. I like the Boston Celtics to keep rolling in this one. Maybe you do too. If you do, $5 down on the Boston Celtics. If they win, you get the $200 in bonus bets that you can then use to bet on everything from Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park in the MLB. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today and to add a win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints are ready to welcome Marshon Lattimore back to the Saints facility as mandatory minicamps get underway later on today. But it's going to be more than just his presence that is most important later on today. We appreciate you very much. As always, make Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports Today. It's programmed specifically for you, right? All the biggest stories from around the world of sports, but with the local experts, people that actually cover the team on a daily basis, giving you all the news, breakdowns, why it's important, in-depth analysis, all that. And none of the yelling and screaming you're going to find on some of those other networks, people who have never talked about this team all year until now. No. You're not going to worry about that. You're getting the people that know it best. You can find it over at Locked On Sports Today. Go ahead and make the switch. You can find it for free over on the YouTube channel, Locked On Sports Today. You'd also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, not only is Alvin Kamara expected to be back at mandatory minicamp this week, it's also Marshon Lattimore. And a lot of people are going to say, well, yeah, of course he's going to be there. It's mandatory. That doesn't really mean a lot that it's mandatory. Let's just look at this real quick. If Marshon Lattimore is there, which look, Dennis Allen has already said he expects him to be there. Marcus Robertson said that he expects him to be there. And in fact, Nick Underhill over at New Orleans Football has already said he's at the facility Monday. So he's going to be there. But look, it still means something that he's there. Don't downplay it just because it's mandatory minicamp. We're talking about a fine of rounding up, about $17,000 if he doesn't show up for the first practice, about $34,000 if he doesn't show up for the second practice, and then about $51,000 if he doesn't show up for the third practice. So that's roughly $101,000 if he doesn't show up. Big whoop for Marshon Lattimore. I will take $101,000 any day. If anybody feels like gifting me $101,000, let me know. Hit me up. I'll take it. But $101,000 of fines, which according to the Atlantic, by the way, not Atlanta, we don't talk about them, The Atlantic, the publication, it's considered as a charitable donation when you get fined because the NFL does typically, or at least its bylaws say, that fines are redirected to charitable donations, so they're technically write-offs, according to the Atlantic. So, not the end of the world. So if he shows up, and this is by the way, this is demonstrable by guys like T. Higgins, who haven't signed a franchise tag tender and does not sound like he's going to be at mandatory minicamp starting later on this week. I believe also starting today. So what is right for one is not right for all in these situations. So Marshon Lattimore, like $101,000 fine, big deal. It's a write-off. So if he's there, it does mean something. I don't mean for it to sound like that, but Lattimore's attendance is nice. But for me, it's really going to come down to his play that's going to speak the loudest, right? What's his involvement? What's his participation level? All these other things. So one of the big questions that I have is what's the intensity level? Like when he shows up and he's working, when Marshon Lattimore is out there working, he is typically working, like with an E, working. Like he is out there busting his hind end. That's the nicest way I can think to say it. He's out there busting his tail. Whenever he's out there, he goes 100% all the time when he's out on the field during practices and things like that, particularly at this time of the season, which is tough to do in outdoor practices. And yes, the Saints will be outdoors because their renovations are still taking place on the indoor facility. So I just want to see the intensity level. Like, is he there, like really getting it in? And if so, I think that speaks highly to maybe concerns that Marshon Lattimore, quote, doesn't care or gave up on the team, quote unquote, things like that, that are criticisms that he has received in the past, I believe, unfairly. My other question is he already look in shape? Not that he has to, right? Everybody, part of mandatory minicamp, part of OTAs, all this other stuff, and really part of the early portion of training camp is about getting in conditioning shape. You want to show up in shape. You don't want to show up, weighing in at a rate that you're weighing in where you don't want to weigh in and things like that, whether that's one way or another. But conditioning is different. Have you really been out there like running? Have you really been out there working? Have you really been out there in this heat? Have you been in different heat? All these other things. So there's always conditioning stuff. That's why there's a ramp up to the beginning of training camp. So if he comes out there and he already looks in shape, he's conditioned, he looks good, he's not, walking around with his hands on his hips or his hands over his head, trying to catch his breath, going in because he's cramping, because it's hot outside, things like that. Like if those things aren't happening, then it shows that there was a level of dedication that was still happening even though he was away from the facility. And I think that that would speak to his credit. The other thing is, what kind of work is he getting in with defensive backs coach Marcus Robertson? I talked to Marcus Robertson last week. I asked him straight up, do you expect Marshon Lattimore to be at camp? And one of the things that he mentioned was that he's missing out on an opportunity by not being at OTAs to start putting in the work that would take him to the next level. He said that he is a phenomenal player and you would never be able to take that away from him, but there are things that he can do to get even better. Still ways for him to improve was one of the phrases that he used. Marcus Robertson did. So is he working with Marcus Robertson to get those things done? Or are he and Marcus Robertson not really working together very much and Marshon's just kind of going through the individual drills and checking the boxes and things like that? I don't expect the latter, but if you see the former, I think that that speaks highly as well in terms of like what the relationship truly is. Because just because Marshon Lattimore is at mandatory minicamps does not mean that the relationship has been repaired. It's a step in the right direction. It is a good indicator that things are indeed heading in the right direction. It does confirm as an indication what Dennis Allen said a few weeks ago at the annual golf classic, where he said that he felt like things were going in a positive direction and that they're moving forward. And so if that is the case, these things kind of each check a box that further that idea. The other thing is, and this was another thing I thought was really interesting that Marcus Robertson said, he said, quote, he basically been talking about like things that he needs more of. He said he needed, quote, more knowledge of the game and how he's being attacked. I love that. This isn't about Marshon Lattimore learning how to play cornerback. He knows how to play cornerback. What the next step for him is learning how he's being attacked and then counteract that. We all know that I did a segment about Alvin Kamara where I kept wanting to call him Marshon Lattimore. Now I'm doing a segment on Marshon Lattimore. I can't stop calling him Alvin Kamara. What's happening? Anyway, we all know that Marshon Lattimore has had his games where he has looked elite and he has had his games where he has looked pedestrian. That is a truth of all NFL players. That is a truth that has been plastered all over social media, articles, think pieces, everything when it comes to Marshon Lattimore. It has been a big time criticism of his time since 2017. Remember, he showed up against the elite talent, but then people accuse him of not being able to necessarily show up against the run-of-the-mill talent. And look, there are examples of exactly that. So this is a part of that. This is right here, what I wrote down and what I just read, that Marcus Robertson is talking about. More knowledge of the game and how he is being attacked. It's not about, hey, Marshon, come here and learn how to play cornerback all over again. No. It's, hey, Marshon, bring all that phenomenal talent that you've got, and now let's buckle up, relearn some of the techniques. Let's buckle in, take a look at how you're being attacked, adjust, and learn how to defend against that. And that's what Marcus Robertson is trying to teach him. So for me, those are the things that are way more important than 23 simply being on the field. I'm ready to see 23 work. And I think 23 is ready to work as well. Coming up next, Marshon Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, of course, big returns after not being with the team so far on the field when it comes to OTAs, now expected to be on the field for mandatory minicamps. But there's a big return and a couple of big introductions that we're excited to see tomorrow as well. Later on today as well. So let's break all that down as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Nobody's been talking about the fact that Paulson Adebo wasn't out on the field for the last 2 open media sessions of OTAs. So I'm excited for him to be back out there during mandatory minicamp, if he indeed is back out there. Also, 2 big-time debuts expected potentially. New Orleans Saints debuts coming up this week, as well as we take a look at some other things that are going on that are very excited, but a little bit under-discussed when it comes to mandatory minicamps. Appreciate you very much, as always, for being here. Don't forget, we are your team every day. Typically, I try to use this time to be very specific about what's coming up in tomorrow's episode, but I got good news for you. I can't be specific because what's coming up tomorrow is going to be entirely based upon what we see later on today at New Orleans Saints minicamp. And that's exciting. That's really, really, really exciting. So you're going to get everything that you need in a quick episode later on today that'll give you the highlights, and then a more in-depth episode tomorrow morning that will kind of dive in a little bit more about what we're seeing from Alvin Kamara, what we saw from Marshon Lattimore, attendance, all of those other things. So make sure you come and check it out. We're going to have a lot of episodes coming up, effectively 2-a-days for the next few days, which is pretty exciting. So make sure you come through for all of that. So look, the New Orleans Saints cornerback room is expected to get a little bit of a boost this week with Marshon Lattimore expected to be out there at mandatory minicamps, but Paulson Adebo could also be making a return as well. And I think that has been so far a bit unsung. Paulson Adebo was out there for the first open day of OTAs. Now, I always try to qualify this because it's you can get a little bit messy sometimes. I can't say Paulson Adebo was out there the first week of OTAs and then was gone the last 2 weeks of OTAs because that wouldn't be true. What is true is that he wasn't there, or that he was there the first day that OTAs were open to the media, and then was not there the second and third days that OTAs were open to media. So I don't know if he showed up at a time later or whatever, or if he was there sometimes and then not there other times, and the times that he wasn't there happened to be when we were there. But for us, it would be a return to the field for Paulson Adebo. We don't yet know why he missed. Dennis Allen seemed to be pretty upfront about injuries, things like that, over the course of OTAs. He seemed to be pretty upfront too about like people that were missing for family things, travel, personal stuff, all that other stuff, but never really got any details on Paulson Adebo. So hopefully seeing not only 23, but 29 out there to begin mandatory minicamps, that would go a long way for this team, I think. And that would be another one of those boosts to this very talented secondary that the New Orleans Saints are set the field again here in 2024. Now, do keep in mind, Paulson Adebo is in a contract year. So if he all of a sudden goes missing with no details, you're going to hear a lot of whispers about that. Because could he be on the move? Could the Saints and he be at a stalemate when it comes to contract negotiation? Well, not the Saints and he, but could the Saints and his representation be at a stalemate when it comes to his contract negotiations and things like that, if there are contract negotiations going on? I'm not going to speculate about any of that at this point. I'm just highlighting that like these are the types of conversations that can quickly get away from a team, right? And can quickly overshadow what's actually happening with a team. So what I will say is that I just want to see if he's back out there on the field. If he's not, then I'll start asking the pointed questions. Where is he? What's going on? Things like that. Don't get me wrong, or don't worry. But I am very curious to see if the New Orleans Saints not only get 23, but 29 back out on the field as well. And beyond that, I know I said pair of returns. It's really one return and one debut. But are they going to get 34 out there as well? Second round selection, Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama. There was Dennis Allen acknowledged that he could potentially be out there. Now, what I would expect when it comes to Kool-Aid McKinstry, unlike Marshon Lattimore, unlike the return of Paulson Adebo, is that if he is out there, he'll probably do like individual drills, but then not participate in like 7-on-7s and team drills and things like that. And that would not be a surprise. Let me be really, really clear about that. Our expectation from draft night, or the day 2 of the draft night, was that Kool-Aid would not be participating fully until some point during training camp, that he would not be participating fully in the spring. And that technically is still now, right? We would consider this still the spring portion of what's going down. So getting Kool-Aid out there doesn't really bolster your secondary because he's not going to be working with the secondary when it comes to those team drills and stuff like that. But it does begin to get him acclimated with the team, begin to get him acclimated with the coaching staff, begins to get him acclimated with what it is that the New Orleans Saints are going to ask him to do, and also begins to get him a little bit more familiar with how these practices go, what he's going to be asked to do each week, all these other things. So I do think that there's value there, and I'm excited to see him out on the field. So we could see 23 return, we could see 29 return, and then we could see the debut of, or at least the Saints debut of Kool-Aid McKinstry at some capacity. Again, I don't think he's going to be out there fully participating and like competing and running in drills and stuff like that, but that's okay. He would be out there doing individual drills, and I think that still goes a pretty long way, if not just off to the side doing some side work, but we've kind of seen glimpses of that over the course of the offseason already so far with OTAs. Finally, another black and gold debut that we could see is Chase Young. We haven't seen Chase Young out in any capacity so far when it comes to OTA. So even if he's just off to the side and watching, if he's dressed out but not participating, if he's doing individual drills but not doing like 7-on-7s and team drills, still exciting. Still good to see, right? Because then at least he's starting to get some of that work in with Carl Granderson and around Carl Granderson and with Cam Jordan and around Cam Jordan and so on and so forth. I wouldn't expect to see Chase Young fully participating until some point during training camp. Don't forget, like in California, don't forget, Dennis Allen also gave a little bit of an update on Chase Young in terms of his expected timeline for his next update, which will be, quote, in a couple of weeks. So I would say maybe in a week or two from now, from these mini camps, will we get a better idea of how far along Chase Young is. But apparently he has been at the facility. He's been doing their regimen. He's been doing all the things that they're asking to get him out on the field. And he wants to and has been working to get out on the field himself. So sounds like everything's going well, but we'll get a better update or a bigger update at a later time. Another guy that we haven't seen yet that I'm very interested in. Now, we've seen him in the locker room. We just haven't seen him out on the field. Is wide receiver Stanley Morgan Jr. I know he's not like a household name or anything like that, but like cool stories from the area. You know, got drafted by Cincinnati, spent time in Cincinnati being like a core special teamer for them. The Saints lost a lot of special team snaps over the course of this offseason, so he could have an impact for them. So I'm also looking forward to seeing him, but that's just a little bit of a side note. Biggest things I'm looking forward to, though, of course, Alvin Kamara and the growth that he will bring this offense. Excited to see how the offense changes a little bit, like what more we get to see now that 41 would be in the lineup. 23, Marshon Lattimore, what he brings. And then the return of Paulson Adebo and the debut of some other guys in the secondary can go a very long way for this team as well. So very, very excited as mini camps kick off later on today. Just as a reminder, another quick episode for you later on today. If you don't want to wait, become a Locked On Saints insider. Who Dat, text it, Who Dat to 504-285-7473. Or click the link in the description wherever you're watching or listening. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSaints to get started, because that's the first thing that I do after we're done talking with Dennis Allen and the coaches. I go back to the Saints media room and I immediately send, here's what I saw during mini camps, practices, things like that. So if you want it quicker, that's the place to do it. Otherwise, later on tonight, 20-minute or so episode, giving you all the biggest highlights that you need from the day. And then tomorrow morning, breaking it down in depth, and then we'll do it all over again Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday morning. So I can't wait. Appreciate you very much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports Today, the show. There's a 24/7 stream, but there's also the show hosted by Peter Bukowski, 20-25 minutes, all the biggest stories from around the world of sports. You can also go and check out Jake Madison over at Locked On Pelicans. Locked On LSU on a little bit of a hiatus right now, but you are going to be so excited about what's on the way for Locked On LSU. Appreciate you very much as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you. Let's get it. Is that right?